It's been over 100 years since dungeons brought a new era of very dangerous monsters to the world. To survive, some people began to awaken very special abilities. Now we see a hand tightly gripping another person's clothes. The white-haired guy tries to explain his new adjustment that would make a skill way more useful. He stands there begging for the professor to speak well of his research paper. But the old man with glasses just snatches the papers from his hand with a very serious expression. Then, out of nowhere, the mage creates a blue flame that gives the poor researcher a huge scare. The white-haired guy is in shock, breaking out in a cold sweat as he listens to some very harsh words. The professor says that a thesis from a low-class guy isn't even worth reading at all. The people with powers became mages, and their strength was measured by just one single thing. Success depended on a diploma, and the strongest always studied at the best colleges. Meanwhile, the poorer folks ended up at the bottom with no chance of changing their lives. This was the sad and harsh reality of that whole world for ordinary people. The old man says that skills are the same for everyone, and that the idea of adjusting them is absurd, and with that, he rips the research in half, saying it was all trash created by a nobody. Then the professor throws all the papers into the air, saying they wouldn't be accepted anywhere. The poor guy falls to his knees, hearing that he'd be better off begging on the street. A while later, we see the poor man huddled in an alley as snow falls on his head. He's shivering from the cold and feels like garbage because of the professor's cruel words. But the sadness turns into intense anger, and the white-haired man punches a trash can, cursing the professor. He gets worked up, wondering why they can't see that his technique would help weaker mages. Suddenly, the mood changes, and the researcher is startled when someone calls him a punching bag. Two well-dressed playboys are staring at the poor man with very wicked smiles. A moment later, the poor guy is thrown hard to the ground, feeling immense pain from the impact. The bullies look at the guy on the ground, and one of them says he's not sure if it's a good idea to hit him so much. The other blonde one just laughs and says a weirdo dressed in rags like that doesn't go to their school. Then a foot stomps down hard right next to his face, threatening to end the guy. The bully smushes the white-haired man's face and says no one would care if he disappeared. His red-haired friend agrees with this cruelty, and the two continue to laugh at the poor man. But the man on the ground grinds his teeth in rage, and the blonde guy is a little surprised by this. To put the trash in its place, the student creates a bright ball of energy in front of the guy's face. The magic glows brightly on the bully's finger, showing the immense danger of the attack. The kid gives a confident, evil smile, ready to unleash his power without mercy. With the energy in his hand, he mockingly asks if the beggar has the guts to fight back now. He warns that if Trash challenges the college elite, he won't even be able to live in the alleys. The white-haired man creates a small blue flame in his hand, sweating from fear of the threat. In his mind, if he could use his adjustment technique, it would be easy to take these guys down. But in this world, a diploma was everything, and a guy from the bottom couldn't fight the elite. With his pride completely wounded, the poor researcher quickly gets up and starts running away. In pure desperation, he runs for the alley exit, screaming for help from anyone on the street. The poor man runs frantically, asking the people on the street to call the police as fast as possible. But his panicked face only ends up scaring a woman who was passing by. Then, the mother pulls her son away and tells him to study hard so he doesn't become trash when he grows up. Hearing that completely shatters what little hope the poor man still had inside him. And to make things worse, the blonde student hits the poor guy in the back with a powerful magic spell. The huge impact throws the white-haired man against the wall, injuring him badly. He's left breathless, losing his strength, and feels like his body can't take any more. And with that, the wicked young men look at the guy on the ground with cruel smiles on their faces. But they realize they've gone too far and decide to run away from the scene. The researcher is left lying on the cold ground as his life slowly fades away. In his final moments, he regrets never having talent or a good education. He wonders if being low class justifies so much cruelty and all this neglect. Then the poor guy reaches out his hand, remembering how his life's work was humiliated. Then his arm falls limply, showing that his end had truly come. A tear rolls down his face as he accepts his very sad fate. Suddenly, the scene changes, and a boy with blue hair wakes up leaning against a tree trunk. The kid slowly opens his eyes, a bit confused by what's happening now. But his expression quickly changes to pure shock when he notices something around him. He jumps to his feet and stares at the place with complete surprise in his eyes. Touching his own chest, the boy breathes a sigh of relief when he realizes he's still alive. But the confusion only gets worse when he notices a very important detail in front of him. The kid stares at a huge building and recognizes it as the famous Tokunada Academy. That was the exact same place where he had studied some 70 years in the past. He finds it all very strange because this building had been renovated a long time ago, and with that, a crazy idea pops into his head, leaving him completely speechless. At that moment, a girl's scream for help interrupts his thoughts. The reincarnated boy runs toward the noise and finds a group of people causing trouble, and looking at the scene from a distance, the kid immediately figures out what's going on. A girl with purple hair is crying, while surrounded by two students much bigger than her. The poor girl tries to back away, terrified of the wicked smile the bully is showing. The coward dangles the girl's student handbook, teasing her in a very cruel way. Without that document, the poor student wouldn't even be able to buy a piece of bread on the street. And holding her hair, the brute mockingly asks if she wants her handbook back. A moment later, he grabs the girl's arms and demands that she pay for the handbook first. The bully says with great anger that low-class trash has no human rights. Hearing those horrible words leaves the student in pure despair, unable to react. But out of nowhere, a powerful shot of blue magic hits the bully right in the face. The impact is so strong that the brute flies backward and lands on his back on the stone ground. The girl and the other bully are in shock from the surprise attack that came out of nowhere. The friend panics, trying to figure out who had the nerve to use magic. From a distance, we see the blue-haired boy with his hand forward, surrounded by a strong wind. He holds his attack pose and shows a very serious and focused look in the guy's direction. The bullies doubt the shot came from him because the distance was over 50 meters. They know the normal range of magic is shorter and think the kid used some kind of trick. The reincarnated boy looks at his own hand and confirms that his range adjustment had worked. He managed to decrease the magic's power to increase the strike's distance in a brilliant way. The student who was saved stares at her rescuer and says his name with great admiration. Seeing the mana glow, the kid smiles as he realizes all his knowledge has been retained. And with this new chance and his old talent, he feels he can now change everything in this world. After all, in his past life, his genius wasn't accepted just because he didn't have a diploma. So the kid clenches his fist and realizes that if time has turned back, this is his big chance. And with that, he promises he will reach the top of the academy to change this miserable life. Then the reincarnated boy walks with great confidence, releasing a powerful aura all around. But the bully glares at the young man with great anger and insults him for the humiliation. At that moment, the blue-haired student just looks back, maintaining his very calm posture. Then the brute yells when he realizes that kid is just trash from the lowest class. And with that, he gives a wicked smile and mocks his enemy's weakest ability. The coward says with a very tense look that the boy just made a huge mistake. But the protagonist warns that if he told the school, he'd be expelled on the spot. Then the young man asks if the big guy is ready to become famous for losing to trash. Hearing this taunt leaves the troublemaker fuming with rage and grinding his teeth hard. At that instant, his friend suggests forgetting magic and just giving the hero a good beating. But the aggressor takes a deep breath and smiles, saying it was just a lucky shot. With that, he leaves with his friend, promising he'll make the boy regret it. The other bully runs after his boss, not understanding this sudden retreat. With the path clear, the boy focuses his attention on the fallen girl as the rivals disappear. The purple-haired student stares at her great savior with a look of admiration in her eyes. A while later, we see the Grand Academy from the outside, showing students paying attention in class. In the classroom, the teacher with glasses yells, calling all the students the dregs of society. He says that the class is useless and that they should be grateful to even have lessons. Listening to the teacher's shouts, the reincarnated boy rests his face in his hand, showing great boredom. Then the young man gives a small smile, finding the very familiar situation amusing. He finds the professor's insults quite nostalgic, remembering the division of the classes. The protagonist is in Class D, which is known for having the students with the least talent. Being the bottom of the school, they were always targets of ridicule from the other classes. They served as a warning to the elite to work hard, so they'd never end up the same way. At that moment, the professor points to the board and announces a very difficult problem to solve. The teacher notices the blue-haired student is distracted and decides to test the kid's flaws. And with great anger, he complains about the boy's attitude, saying he has a lot of nerve. The man gives a sadistic smile, thinking it would be a good idea to embarrass the new kid. Then the student hears his name called out loud and pays attention right away. Then the professor tells the boy to stand up and try to solve problem number 5 on the board. The reincarnated boy stares at the board with confusing calculations while the old man watches his back. The teacher smiles confidently, remembering that this question was impossible for the lowest class. He wanted to punish the student's lack of respect by making him face a huge embarrassment. The man with glasses mockingly asks if the hero can't find the right answer, but before being completely humiliated, the young man surprises everyone and gives the solution directly. The professor looks at the book, completely shocked to see that the calculation was perfect. Desperate, the old man tries to cover it up by yelling that it was definitely wrong. Then the reincarnated boy turns the tables, telling the professor to explain the right reasoning to everyone. Hearing this request makes the professor sweat and grind his teeth, with no way to escape. The student shows a sharp gaze, remembering a very important detail from his past life. The old exams from that famous college were known for publishing only the result, and with that, the young man faces the teacher, calmly asking if there's a problem. Completely cornered, the man swallows his pride and admits the boy was right. The protagonist returns to his desk, leaving the professor furious for being made a fool of. The old man silently vows that the cocky student wouldn't get away with that humiliation. Later, the students gather on the sports field for combat training class. At that moment, the professor shows a malicious look and stands next to the brute from before. The teacher then announces that the young man from the upper class would be helping with the class's fights. The professor with glasses smiles, saying he's sorry for asking for help with a class like this. But the platinum-haired student responds calmly and tells him not to worry. The big guy arrogantly states that he's grateful for the chance to guide the lower class folks. Then the hero is a little surprised when he hears the teacher call his name in the middle of the field. With a wicked look, the old man says that he is the worst student and will receive a harsh lesson. Hearing that makes the boy lower his gaze, already understanding the man's real intention. With no way out, the young man agrees to the order and calmly walks to the center of the area. At that moment, the professor puts his hand on the brute's shoulder, reminding him it was just practice. But soon after, he shows a dark face and tells him not to end the fight quickly. And with that, the bully agrees and flashes a sadistic smile, understanding the cruel message. The professor celebrates in his thoughts as he told the student to mess up the boy's arms. He knows very well that trash from the worst class wouldn't receive good treatment in the infirmary. Thus, the old man's evil plan was to send the young man to the hospital and ensure his expulsion. The other students watch, whispering that the boy was done for drawing attention. Then the purple-haired girl becomes very worried and afraid of what was about to happen. On the field, the brute bows mockingly and invites his rival to the fake training session. The protagonist just accepts the challenge with his eyes closed, in a completely relaxed posture. With both of them ready, the professor raises his hand and finally declares the start of the big fight. Right away, the platinum-haired guy activates his ability and covers his whole body with stone armor. The coward smiles, wanting to show what happens when trash with weak magic gets cocky. But the reincarnated boy doesn't show a hint of fear and calmly agrees with his statement. Then the brute charges, yelling that his armor would never be broken. However, The young man points his finger, glowing blue, and tells his rival not to be so sure. The hero concentrates a huge amount of energy, preparing to fire the shot. Desperate with rage, the aggressor prepares a giant stone punch, wanting to crush the boy. At that moment, the hero remembers the rule that says skills act the same for every user. Since the power and speed were already set, no one thought it was possible to improve spells, and that was exactly why natural-born talent was so valuable in that world. The protagonist knows the big guy is right about the tough resistance of his defense. A normal magic bullet could never break the stone armor that was coming at him fast. So he uses his adjustment, setting range and speed to 0 to focus everything on power. In his past life, the idea that diplomas defined someone's worth was very common, but with a single shot, a giant blue flash illuminates the field with a sinister energy. The brute coughs up blood and his eyes go wide, feeling the brutal impact. The force of the blow is so crazy that the stone armor shatters, sending him flying. With smoke coming from his finger, the young man says he will destroy that absurd common sense. Sometime later, we see the reincarnated boy sitting at his desk, looking out the window with a bored expression. Resting his face in his hand, he wonders if he drew too much attention in the last fight. But with only 1 year left until graduation, he knows he can't worry about appearances. Suddenly, the boy is pulled from his thoughts when he hears a shy voice calling him nearby. It's the purple-haired girl holding a small bag and asking if she can have lunch with him. Then we see a ball with some very strange food, proving that life in the lowest class was tough. The other students stare at the depressing ration with empty faces, feeling very sad. At that moment, an older guy approaches, laughing and reminding them they have no money for food. The coward orders the new students to kneel on the floor, making everyone obey out of pure fear. Laughing, the aggressor says that trash from their class should crawl and beg for mercy. However, before he could finish his sentence, the bully is hit by a blue bolt in the legs. The shock of the blow is so great that the brute's eyes roll back as he drools in pain, and with that, the guy falls flat and smashes his face right into the bowl he was mocking. The students watch the body lying on the ground, completely shocked by the bizarre scene before them. Then they look to the side and notice a blue-haired boy calmly leaning against a tree. The hero smiles with his finger smoking, happy to see his range adjustment is sharp. He knows that with these infinite variations of magic, he could reach the top of the academy. Then the purple-haired girl tells the boy to be careful, as attacking others causes trouble. But the young man laughs, saying no one would suspect the guy with the weakest magic if she doesn't tell. And with that, he sits on the ground, inviting his friend to have lunch since the guys were gone. The two then enjoy the calm atmosphere of the place, savoring the moment together by the tree. Eating his lunch, the hero hears the girl thank him very shyly for his help before. With his eyes closed, the boy tells her to relax and says he only got involved because he wanted to. Next, he warns that hanging out with him would attract bad attention, asking if that was why. But the purple-haired girl smiles shyly, saying she still hasn't properly thanked him. The blue-haired young man watches her in silence, maintaining a very thoughtful expression. He then takes a big bite of his rice ball, praising the girl for being considerate. And with that, the student starts eating her simple lunch, keeping a more distant look. In his mind, the hero remembers he never spoke to her in school, but met her after graduating. In his past life, the old researcher studied various skills while creating his adjustment, and that young woman was one of the rare magic users who actively helped with his work. So the reincarnated boy calls his friend Kagami and mentions the doubles exam this week. The girl confirms and is shocked when the boy asks to take the test with her. He knows that powers don't awaken after birth, proving she was already hiding a rare magic. Very nervous, the girl asks the reason for the invitation, and the protagonist is quite direct. The young man confidently reveals that he chose her because of her powerful mystic eyes. Hearing this big secret leaves the girl in a pure panic, wanting to know how he found out. The boy stands up, commenting that this visual magic is too rare to be in the lowest class. Then the hero extends his hand to the student, showing that he's completely willing to help. The boy smiles, stating that having someone so strong by his side would be an advantage on the test. The girl hesitates for a moment and then sadly confesses that she really does have this gift. She explains that even though she has incredible magic, she's still a failure for only having 2 skills. The boy understands the situation, since the number of powers defines a mage's talent. He comments that the normal average for people is to have 4 different spells in fights. But with a very gentle smile, the protagonist decides to cut himself off and calm his friend down. The young man tells her not to worry, as he only has the weakest spell of all. Shaking hands, the girl reveals that she has always been terrified of people's expectations, and because of her low magic limit, she preferred to hide her rare eyes at school. Her biggest trauma was being called useless behind her back, even with a special gift, and with that, she cries, huddled up, admitting she's scared to death of finding out the truth. The hero watches his companion cry in silence, perfectly understanding that pain. However, the boy calls her name in a firm voice, making her quickly lift her face. The protagonist declares with conviction that he wants to advance directly to Class B in the exam. Extending his hand again, he asks if the girl accepts following him on this journey. The two remain in a brief silence on the lawn as the calm wind rustles the leaves. The hero breaks the mood and warns that the biggest challenge of this test will be the cluster group. The girl is very confused and touches her chin, having never heard that name before. The young man sighs and remembers that students from the low class are never invited to those groups. He explains simply that it's a bunch of students who dominate the rankings by helping each other. During academic tests, these tricksters use their union magic to cheat on a massive scale. In combat tests, they rig the results before the fights, guaranteeing a good grade. The girl remembers that this is forbidden, but the hero bets the teachers are bribed. In his mind, he imagines a red-haired student, knowing that the king of the group ran everything. The reincarnated boy warns his friend to keep in mind that most elite mages are part of it. The boy says that in the next test, these rich kids will gather dozens of mages to cheat. But with a big, confident smile, the protagonist says he has a good plan. Changing scenes, we see the armor-wearing brute running desperately through a huge courtyard. In a cold sweat, he reaches the famous red-haired student, calling his name and asking for help. The henchman remembers the brutal blow he took and says that with help, they could crush that newbie. However, the feared king shows no mercy and punches the henchman, knocking him to the ground. The great leader shouts furiously, declaring that he would never waste his time on trash. The big guy apologizes, terrified, while holding his bleeding nose. Turning his back, the feared villain tells his subordinate to shut up and never give him orders again. As he walks through the back of the courtyard, the villain mutters our hero's name darkly. Then the red-haired villain smiles, warning that he won't forgive the newbie if he gets cocky. With a furious look, he proudly declares this being the great king of the entire academy. Next, we see all the students gathered in a giant hall, waiting for instructions. Then, the hooded master takes the floor, announcing that the great training exercise was about to begin. He calmly explains that the students will have to clear the dungeon using their pairs. And with that, the man opens a glowing blue portal, revealing the grade depends on the monsters. Therefore, the main rule is that points only go to the student who delivers the final blow, and for the final test grade, the system will add up the points of both partners. Hearing the rules makes many background characters break out in a cold sweat as the instructor prepares. The henchman of the elite group maintains serious expressions, already knowing how to cheat the system. At that moment, the old man raises his hand high, allowing everyone to enter the portal. Immediately, a horde of students runs out at full speed, wanting to enter the dungeon quickly. Watching the chaos, the purple-haired girl gets nervous, thinking they were going to be left behind. But she ends up getting a hard bump on the shoulder and hurries her companion to go. The arrogant extra runs by, yelling for the trash from the lowest class to get out of the way. Nearby, 2 young men whisper a secret password, proving that the cheating was already underway. With the correct confirmation, the guard of the circle lets the disguised alley pass. This way, the members of the little group could enter the portal first, securing the weak monsters. And to screw over the rest of the school, the cheaters form a human barrier at the portal. Then the hero calmly walks over, deducing they created a password for their partners. He notices an ordinary boy trembling with fear as he's violently blocked by the bullies. This dirty blockade served to delay the normal new students, making them lose a lot of time. Understanding the unfair situation, the girl despairs, knowing their chances have gone down the drain. However, the protagonist tells her not to worry about it, leaving her very confused. Showing a confident smile, the boy states that it's much better to let the cowards go first. The young man remembers that luckily, the real monsters from the top class aren't in the exam. Without those powerful rich kids in the way, the hero knows there's an easy way to turn the tables. A while later, the guards at the blockade notice the courtyard has emptied and decide to enter. Being the last ones in the dirty scheme, they run happily to take advantage of the remaining monsters. And with that, the large white hall finally becomes empty, with only our duo left at the back. The reincarnated boy looks at the portal, confirming that all the competition had already moved ahead. So they pick up the pace and enter the magic rift, ready to begin the real mission. Passing through the light, the two arrive in a very dark forest full of giant trees. The blue-haired boy commands the start of the plan, and the girl agrees with a nod. At that moment, she closes her eyes, activating her skill and raising a purple scanning dome. The force field covers a good portion of the area, serving to track the enemy's positions. Without wasting time, the protagonist touches his partner's back and whispers his adjustment. Focusing on the magic, the boy decides to reduce the duration and precision of his companion's radar. By sacrificing those attributes, he channels all the energy into expanding the dome's range. Opening her eyes, the student is completely shocked to feel her vision extend much farther. She knows very well that normal abilities only evolve if a mage trains for many years. The world's common sense says that a spell's power never changes without it leveling up. But noticing the adjustment, the young woman swallows hard, realizing her partner bends the laws of magic. His touch on her back proved that he could shape any magic as he wished. Terrified, the girl realizes that if the academy found out about the existence of this gift, the entire balance of power would be destroyed, and the mage's common sense would become a joke. While she's freaking out, the boy raises his own arm, activating the adjustment on his offensive magic. With a cold look, he sets the attack power to 0 and cuts the speed to focus on infinite range. Then a small sphere of light leaves his finger and hangs in the air, completely harmless. In a matter of seconds, dozens of these magical spheres begin to sprout in the dark forest. Then he jumps and steps on one of those bright magical spheres with ease. Then the girl watches in awe as the boy uses the small lights like a staircase in the air. The girl confesses in her thoughts that she finds it incredible he uses attacks as support. Reaching a high altitude, the protagonist gains an excellent advantage in the air, looking over the forest. At that moment, the hero calls his partner's name, and she agrees, focused on the mission, and with that, the student uses her special magic, revealing a golden gear in her eye. The magic's glow quickly hits a target in the air, making the extra freeze on the spot. Seeing the scene, the blue-haired boy gives a slight smile, satisfied with the plan. That ability paralyzed everything she looked at, proving to be a very overpowered technique. Even though it doesn't work on living bodies, the girl used the magic on the clothes and froze the enemy. Thus, the young man manages to float calmly up high without being able to fall. Laughing, he points his finger, noting that it was quite difficult to aim while creating the steps. But our hero doesn't panic and decides to perform another one of his magic adjustments. This time, the boy decreases the power while keeping the speed intact to gain a lot of range. Very confident, the boy shouts again to his friend down below, giving a warning. Then the girl passes on the exact coordinates of the creatures tracked by her radar. Hearing those perfect directions makes the reincarnated boy smile, praising his ally's work. At that instant, he fires several blue beams as if he were an elite sniper in the air. The magical shots cross the entire night sky, shining brightly like real stars. With lethal precision, the rays pierce the bodies of several monsters in the forest. After annihilating the prey, the young man ends his magic and gently falls toward the ground. With a wicked look, the boy declares that this just was the first step to taking down the rivals. Silence takes over the dark sky after the duo quickly clears a large area. Then the young man asks if they should move on, and the girl excitedly agrees. But suddenly several sharp rocks fly toward them, catching them both by surprise. Heavy footsteps echo through the bushes, showing that several students were furiously running to attack. In an instant, 4 senior students surround our duo, giving them no chance to escape. The purple-haired girl is frightened by the ambush, while the hero just remains calm. Without mercy, the cowardly rivals launch all their elemental spells, aiming at the 2 of them. Acting quickly, the young man pushes his companion away, trying to save her life. With the push, the magical attacks barely miss, cutting through the air with force. The leader of the enemy group gives a dark laugh, stating that he had predicted this dodge. At that exact moment, the student screams in pure panic, warning of a great danger. The boy's eyes widen as he notices a huge magical rock flying in his direction. Pushing his hand forward, the cowardly rival celebrates the fatal blow, sending the trash from the bottom to the ground. Seeing her friend's certain demise, the poor girl falls into complete despair, crying out for him. The senior extra smiles from ear to ear, overjoyed at eliminating a rival. But to everyone's shock, the large rock shatters completely, creating a cloud of dust. The villain's smile vanishes instantly, replaced by a look of panic and confusion. The hero emerges from the dust, revealing that the rival's attack stopped 3 centimeters from him. In a cold sweat, the enemy finally understands that the target perfectly calculated the distance. The group panics, because memorizing the magic limit of thousands of students would be impossible. Desperate, the leader tries to calm down, yelling that it was definitely just pure luck. The other teammate swallows hard, thinking it's crazy for someone to fight knowing all skills by heart. However, the protagonist's cold demeanor proves that he is truly a monster on the field. Very calmly, the boy notes that this tactic of grouping pairs was the work of the cheaters. He points his finger, warning that he wasn't going to attack students, but changed his mind after this. Then the reincarnated boy raises his hand, gathering blue energy and announcing his adjustment. Terrified, the group leader quickly covers his body with stone armor. But the hero fires so fast that he annihilates all the enemies at once, leaving them no time to react. The leader takes a magic blow right to the forehead and screams in pain, falling hard to the ground. The hero walks among the fallen bodies, explaining that he split the shot into 4. Then the protagonist's face turns serious, warning that they still had the exam to finish. Turning his back, the boy tells the cowards to fend for themselves against the dangers. Hearing that makes the big guy wake up a bit confused, wondering about their test. But soon the villain lets out a bizarre laugh, yelling that the doe's exam was already over. The coward reveals that the school's rich elite had already gathered all the monsters in the area. That dirty plan ensured that only the group members would share the points. With a wicked smile, the bully scoffs, saying that any chance of victory has gone down the drain. He yells that there were no enemies left loose in that dungeon for the duo to take down. Understanding the situation, the student clenches her fists in frustration, realizing the test was rigged. Tears fall from the girl's face as she laments, thinking she was going to change her life. The big guy tries to get up, yelling with hatred that trash from the bottom would never have a chance. However, before finishing the insult, the villain takes another shot to the head and passes out. With smoke coming from his finger, the blue-haired young man tells his partner not to worry. Walking through the woods, the hero shows a confident look, stating that everything is going according to his plan. The girl asks in surprise if he can turn the tables, and the boy mentions the rival's weakness. Hearing that detail leaves the purple-haired student confused, not understanding what he said. The reincarnated boy smiles, explaining that the group of cheaters breaks easily if their foundation is destroyed. Next, the two arrive at the edge of a large cliff, with the hero choosing the spot. Looking down, they see the huge army of rich kids blocking the monsters. That crowd perfectly isolated the creatures, ensuring a monopoly on the targets. The young woman becomes desperate, commenting that their barrier was perfect and without gaps. But the boy kneels at the edge and points down, assuring her she was wrong. Then, a strong blue light shines from the tip of his finger, revealing the attack that would crush their tactic. With great force, the young man fires a bright blue beam that quickly cuts across the entire cliff. The swift shot flies through the air and hits a bird monster right above their heads. The poor creature lets out a sharp cry of pain as its body is pierced by the laser. The monster falls defeated in the middle of the circle, leaving the rich kids in shock, trying to find the attacker. Looking at the cliff, they can't believe a perfect shot was fired from so far away. The boy explains in his mind that the more range he adds, the weaker the blow becomes. However, even without raw power, the beam was still useful for taking down already tired monsters. Down below, the elite fall into pure desperation, realizing the newbie would steal their points. Then an extra tearfully says that the best option was to attack the beasts very quickly. But the advisor ends up getting a violent punch from an ally who didn't want to share the points. Seeing the confusion, a teammate begs them to stop fighting since the focus was the enemy. But greed takes over the clearing, making all the rich kids attack each other. Watching the chaos, the hero comments that this union was formed only to ensure good grades. Therefore, the only thing that kept these guys together was the certainty of a big profit. With the threat of having all their points stolen by a sniper, that agreement went down the drain. The gang starts to brutally annihilate each other, proving they had no real loyalty. The purple-haired girl watches the war, shocked at how easily her companion manipulated the mages. In her thoughts, she finds it crazy that a strategist like him lived in the worst class. In the clearing, the bloodbath rages on, with mages cutting down rivals for their prey. Suddenly, two bullies' eyes go wide as they hear a huge sound coming from the forest. The extra breaks into a cold sweat and freezes on the spot, feeling an overwhelming presence approaching. A giant beast with red eyes and sharp claws emerges, roaring with pure fury. The colossal bear brutally attacks the crowd, terrifying our girl up on the cliff. The blue-haired boy grinds his teeth, becoming very tense at the appearance of such a creature. Staring at the deadly target, the protagonist realizes that this creature's strength was different. The hero is startled to notice that the massive beast was actually an irregular monster. The system's warning echoes through the air, confirming the presence of the mutant creature in the dungeon. The school rule was clear and ordered students to flee from these very dangerous anomalies. Then the purple-haired girl lets out a scream of pure terror upon seeing that bizarre creature. The boy deduces that irregulars are just beasts that have undergone a sinister mutation. He realizes the animal survived for too long in the dungeon until it managed to evolve. And with that, the hero warns that the challenge far exceeded the level of the student's exam. The reincarnated boy states, with his back turned, that he has no intention of playing hero, but the blue-haired young man refuses to just stand by and watch everyone get taken out. So the boy turns his head and tells his partner to hide until the test is over. The giant bear punches the ground, scattering the cowardly elite who were running and crying in fear. The protagonist jumps off the cliff without a second thought, wanting to get the girl away from danger. He murmurs in his thoughts that he couldn't drag the girl into a deadly fight. Up above, the student tries to reach out her hand, calling for her friend in great desperation. At that moment, screams for help echo through the dark forest, telling everyone to run. The elite students crawl on the ground, crying like babies in front of the bear. The brutal beast lets out a deafening roar, showing all its fury against its prey. And with that, the animal raises its giant paw, ready to crush an extra. The fallen boy freezes in terror, awaiting his end, while the hero whispers his adjustment. Then the reincarnated boy sets the shot's speed and range to 0, putting everything into damage power. He alters the shape of the leftover spell and blocks the bear by creating a blue shield. The impact of the claw collides with the magic barrier, generating a strong shockwave in the air. The coward's eyes go wide, unable to believe he was just saved by a student from the bottom class. The other extras are in pure shock, seeing the trash from the bottom block a blow like that. Holding back the brutal attack, the hero notices his arm has gone numb from the impact. The young man gives a nervous smile, admitting that creature was on a completely absurd level. At that moment, the beast's eyes turn red as it presses its paw with more murderous fury. The crushing force shatters the blue shield, and sends the protagonist tumbling through the bushes. He lands on his feet, skidding, as the mutant bear charges forward at an incredible speed. With no time to waste, the hero points his glowing finger at the ground, activating his swift spell. Then the boy fires a concentrated shot that hits the giant beast right in the chest. The impact causes a small explosion on the creature's tough fur, releasing a dense smoke. But the creature just growls with great anger, proving the attack caused no damage. The young man clicks his tongue, realizing his low level was too weak against the mutant. The giant monster raises its head, letting out a roar that makes the entire forest tremble. Immediately after, the animal attacks with its massive paw, trying to slash the boy's face. Using his agility, the reincarnated boy throws his body back and narrowly escapes the blow. He sweats, dodging the attacks and finding this fight to be a huge headache. And with that, the hero runs to get some distance, forming a very risky plan in his mind. The boy uses his legs to leap high backward, gaining a lot of distance from his rival. Floating in the air, he extends his arm, concentrating a strong blue light at his fingertip. Showing a confident smile, the young man bets his next target would suffer fatal damage. Then a tiny beam crosses the air and hits the beast's eye with perfect precision. The monster screams in agony, spraying a lot of blood as its vision is severely wounded. The hero lands in a crouch, noticing that the damage to the weak spot was less than he expected. Blinded by fury, the mutant raises its paws, bringing down a brutal blow, wanting to crush the boy. But the young man stands up calmly, warning that angry blows would never hit him. However, the boy's eyes widen, cutting himself off as he hears a crying sound. He notices one of the extras lying on the ground, crying with an injury on his leg. The hero gets tense because if he dodged, the enemy's blow would crush the injured student. The giant beast's claw comes down quickly, giving the hero no time to change his magic. Realizing his classmate's certain demise, the boy tries to protect his body and avoid a fatal blow. At that exact moment, the purple-haired student activates her skill, focusing on the mutant's fur. The young man stumbles back, panting, after the beast's blow stops, just centimeters from his head. Using her magic, the partner froze the monster's movement, trapping it in the blink of an eye. The girl then runs toward the hero, calling his name and showing her courage in battle. The young man notices that his classmate used her ability on the bear's own fur as if it were armor. With a determined look, she says she would fight too, refusing to run away like a coward. The reincarnated boy sighs, remembering that the fight would bring no reward, only danger. However, the girl smiles, stating that she didn't care and wanted to do everything in her power. Even knowing they couldn't win, she suggests the duo should stall until help arrives. Showing a slight smile, the protagonist listens to the plan and agrees to fight with her. But the boy calmly corrects her, not wanting to just hold off the beast until the instructors arrive. He raises his hand and assures her he would never enter a fight without a chance to win. The young man's face then turns serious and satisfied as he realizes his ability has leveled up. A colossal blue energy explodes from his body, creating a flame that pushes his partner back. Pointing his finger, the student activates the focused shot and charges all this new energy. The glowing light leaves the student in shock, seeing her companion use the same magic as before. She is in disbelief, realizing his spell leveled up at a rapid speed. With the magic shining brightly, the protagonist reveals he dedicated his life to the study of spells. The young man knows that facing powerful enemies and focusing hard on the blows makes everything evolve. When the pressure of combat and repetition combine, a skill's evolution is guaranteed. And since his shot just advanced, its raw power has also increased significantly. Without delay, the boy gives his commands, setting all stats to 0 to concentrate everything on power. He then fires a large, bright blue beam that hits the target with explosive fury. The beam grows to a gigantic size, devouring everything and illuminating the night forest. The bear can't withstand the crushing pressure and is consumed by the attack, unable to escape. And the colossal force of the blast tears through the beast's body, making it roar and spit blood. After finishing the magic shot, the surrounding trees sway violently with the wind, and with that, the huge body of the irregular bear collapses to the ground, a hole torn in its chest. The girl looks at the defeated creature, amazed by the new power of the hero's magic. Suddenly, the announcement for the end of the exam echoes through the dungeon, telling everyone to leave. The purple-haired girl is startled by the quick call and realizes the test is over. In his thoughts, the boy fears he won't get the grade for Class B, since the monster wasn't worth points. The young man gives a slight smile, happy to have ended the fight without anyone getting hurt. At that moment, an instructor arrives on the scene with 2 students observing the bear's body. One of them stutters, seeing that a mutant monster was taken down by a newbie. The professor adjusts his glasses, filled with hatred, thinking our reincarnated hero cheated. However, the other man steps in, defending the boy and complaining about the suspicion. And with that, the 2 observe the bear, unsure how to deal with a monster that wasn't part of the plan. But one of the men suggests following the rules, remembering that the anomaly was worth 0 points. But the other teacher praises the young man's bravery, proposing a bonus for saving his classmate. High up on a base in the forest, the duo of extras notices the hero's name at the top. The man points his finger, sweating, realizing the highest score was going to trash. Thus, the examiners declared through the system that the main duo would take first place. Hearing this, our little purple-haired girl celebrates adorably and is very happy. In the cafeteria, the reincarnated boy observes several wonderful dishes after placing first. Savoring a good meal, he notes that these menus were completely forbidden before. However, the student's eyes widen in surprise when he hears an unexpected flirty comment from his side. Laughing, the purple-haired student teases, calling the boy a big eater and making him blush. The hero eats happily, remembering how in his past life he cut expenses to focus on research. Then a large shadow covers the boy as someone suddenly calls his name. The duo of newcomers turns their heads, a bit confused, trying to see who interrupted their lunch. Purple-haired girl's eyes soon widen as she realizes who the student standing there was. But our reincarnated hero just gives a little smirk, as if he was already expecting this. The redhead introduces himself with a flourish, revealing he is none other than the king of Class A. Showing a sharp gaze, the upperclassman praises the newbie's quickness in understanding who was in charge. And with that, the big guy pulls up a chair and sits at the table, warning the boy that he was mistaken. Full of arrogance, the redhead crosses his arms, stating that he was actually the king of the academy. The bully then gets serious, revealing that he watched all the recordings of the practical exam. Accompanied by his little group, the leader admits that our hero's skills weren't bad. The blue-haired young man calmly continues chewing his meat and thanks him for the small compliment. Then the redhead points a knife in the girl's direction, asking if the boy planned to hang around with her. Hearing that leaves the student frozen and very tense from the upperclassman's hostility. The protagonist narrows his eyes, losing his patience and asking where the wretched kid was going with this. Cutting his steak, the redhead says he recognizes his talent, but warns that luck runs out. Eating the meat, the bully comments that the newbie fought hard to get into Class B. Our hero sighs deeply, finally understanding that this conversation was a recruitment invitation. Maintaining his coolness, the young man faces the leader, wanting to know what would happen if he refused. Instantly, the redhead gives a death glare, guaranteeing he would crush the boy without mercy. But our reincarnated hero just lets out a tired sigh and gets up from the table, leaving the wretched kid confused. Picking up his tray, the boy says he didn't care about their dirty tricks and wanted to be left alone. Turning his back, the hero pauses for a moment, remembering to mention one small detail. The young man clarifies that reaching Class B was never his main goal and was far from the top. Hearing those bold words leaves the elite leader quite confused about the newbie's plans. Showing a sharp gaze, the protagonist declares that he intended to climb all the way to the redhead's elite class. The declaration of war makes the upperclassman crack a wicked smile, finding the audacity amusing. Sitting at the table, the boss states that the hero would be trash as a lackey, but would serve as a villain. Then the redhead jumps up from his chair, facing the boy's back and saying his name. The villain gets in the hero's face, furiously warning that there was no turning back now. Not caring at all, the blue-haired young man continues on his way, followed by his scared companion. The arrogant leader sits back down and eats his salad, with his henchmen watching the scene, confused. One of the extras clenches his fists, asking the boss what they would do after that disrespect. But the red-haired upperclassman tells the lackey to shut his mouth right away, leaving the pair scared. Full of rage, the boss yells at those idiots not to try giving him useless advice. The student bows in a desperate apology, fearing he would suffer a severe punishment. Crossing his arms, the villain smiles, declaring that the newbie would be prey for his amusement. Suddenly, the redhead's sharp gaze notices another person approaching in the cafeteria. A mysterious figure with light blue hair walks by, and the villain thinks the timing is perfect. The wicked leader gives a sadistic smile, coming up with a cruel plan to turn the girl against the newbie. The system introduces the icy girl, revealing she was the strongest student in the school. Later, in the Class B classroom, a reincarnated hero walks toward his partner. The young woman is packing her notebooks in her backpack, letting out a heavy sigh and showing her fatigue. The hero comes up beside her desk, commenting that his friend seemed tired with the new routine. Giving a weak smile, she confesses that the lessons in Class B were harder to keep up with. The protagonist scratches his head, finding it all easy, while the girl admires his facility. Then, the student turns her face toward the door, listening to the malicious gossip from outside. Some extras doubted the hero, finding it suspicious for trash to move up a class so quickly. Hearing those cruel rumors makes the poor girl very sad and worried, but the mature young man just places a hand on her shoulder, telling his friend not to pay it any mind. With a confident smile, the boy guarantees that continuing to get results would change everything. Hearing this, his partner is impressed, but is soon startled by a loud noise in the hallway. The protagonist turns his head instantly, a little surprised by all the commotion. Then the door opens, revealing the famous blue-haired girl, which leaves everyone in the room in shock. She was a prodigy student known for holding the top spot and destined to be the strongest. Staring at the prodigy, our reincarnated hero is very confused about what she was doing. With a very serious posture, the blue-haired girl says she was looking for a student, but in an unexpected twist, the elite student scratches her head and admits she forgot the name. Showing frustration, the upperclassman closes her eyes, crosses her arms, and lets out a sigh. She regrets coming all this way for nothing, since she didn't feel any strong presence in that room. Turning her back, the girl says she didn't need to waste her time if this was the level here. The prodigy student then calmly walks toward the exit, apologizing for the interruption. However, before she could leave the room, a mysterious voice calls out to her, drawing her attention. The hero takes a step forward with a smile and asks if the student she was looking for wasn't him. At that moment, their eyes meet, creating an absurd tension that freezes everyone in place. Scratching the back of her neck calmly, the icy girl agrees, saying that must be the name. Walking toward the boy, she states that everything fell into place because she was interested in him. Without backing down an inch, the young man shows confidence and challenges the upperclassmen to a duel. In his thoughts, the boy remembers that the girl would surely dominate the world in the future. Clenching his fist with excitement, the protagonist wanted to test the limits of his power. Then a new voice echoes down the hall, asking the reason for the crowd at the door. A blonde boy with glasses enters the room, revealed to be the second best student in the school. The students from the bottom class panic, wondering what the student council president was doing there. Adjusting his glasses, the blonde leader faces the elite student, wanting to know the reason for her visit. With a neutral posture, the blue-haired girl points to the hero, mentioning the big challenge. The president says that duels in the training arena were allowed if both parties agreed. Suddenly, the arrogant king of the academy appears, finding the situation very interesting. Walking down the hall, the red-haired villain scoffs that a very brave newbie has shown up. Showing a dark look, the bully taunts the prodigy girl, telling her to accept the request. The council president faces the redhead, questioning his intentions, but the villain denies having a plan. Observing the whole boring discussion, our strong upperclassman lets out a sigh and accepts the battle. Putting a hand on her head, the unenthusiastic student just wanted to finish the fight and go home. Seeing his diabolical plan was working, the redhead shows a smile of pure malice. Taking control of the situation, the villain confirms that with that agreement, the fight could happen. The bully extra faces the blonde guy, demanding the council president's approval for the fight. A short time later, everyone arrives at the gigantic training arena on a sunny day. In the middle of the dirt track, the pair of fighters stands face to face, waiting for the showdown. In the stands, the hero's partner shows concern, not understanding the reason for the fight. The blonde referee adjusts his glasses, finding it strange for a newbie to pick a fight with the top student. He looks at the hero, trying to discover the real intention behind such a dangerous challenge. Remaining calm, the reincarnated young man decides to be honest and opens his mouth, revealing what he wanted. The boy confesses that he only wished to test how far his strength would hold up against someone superior. Understanding the newbie's fighting spirit, the counselor closes his eyes, approving his wish. Patting the boy on the back, the referee smiles and tells the boy to fight with all he's got. Moving away from the center of the arena, the blonde boy calls the girl's name to give the warnings. The referee warns that the arena couldn't withstand colossal magic attacks without any limits. Pointing to the field, the referee forbids the young prodigy from using her main technique in the battle. Tossing her blue hair, the girl sighs, stating she didn't need her full power against a newbie. With the rules set, the referee authorizes the start of the battle and quickly moves away from the two. In the stands, the crowd gossips, laughing their heads off at the boy's audacity in facing the top. In the audience, the hero's partner whispers his name with a very worried expression, and with that, the referee raises his arm in the air, signaling that he would start the duel. The two opponents then stare at each other in deadly silence, awaiting the start of combat. Then the blonde lowers his hand, yelling for the fight to begin, and the hero immediately points to attack. But the blue-haired girl reacts instantly and points her finger at the boy like a mirror. The young man activates his magic bullet in piercing mode, concentrating an intense glow in his finger. The upperclassman then conjures the same spell, but a level 3 ice version. Immediately after, the two shots cross the arena, flying quickly toward each other. The projectiles collide in the middle of the field, creating a magical explosion of pure bluish light. Several shards of ice fly in all directions, but the protagonist stands firm in his place. The elite student grinds her teeth, feeling the power of the collision and becoming very surprised. She watches the remnants of the explosion dissipate in the air with a look of pure disbelief. With narrowed eyes, the young woman wonders if she has finally found someone interesting. The hero smirks, wanting to know if he finally got her attention with that attack. The extras in the audience are shocked to see a basic magic bullet match a powerful blow. The boy's friend celebrates happily, seeing that her partner wasn't backing down one bit. The young man thinks the exchange of blows turned the tables, but he couldn't let his guard down. In his mind, the boy forms a plan to land a decisive blow and take control. He fires a new magic shot, adjusting the power and speed to test his opponent. However, the girl dodges the blue beam with great ease, throwing her body backward. The protagonist gets tense, realizing that even a shot focused on speed was too slow. He then changes his strategy and prepares an area of effect attack in his full diffusion mode. The upperclassman dodges all the magic bullets, creating several after-images of herself in the arena. And with that, the student takes advantage of the opening to get closer and lands a kick that the hero blocks. The impact pushes the reincarnated boy back, leaving him surprised by his rival's strength. The boy scratches his head, wondering how she managed to escape such a wide attack. Suddenly, the young man breaks into a smile, understanding everything and discovering her secret ability. The girl's eye glows with a pink aura, revealing that her power came from her vision. With a plan formed, the student points at the upperclassman, already knowing how to deal with her magic. The opponent glares back at him, her eye glowing with a frightening intensity. Her ability allows her to predict the trajectory of enemy attacks by sensing malice. And with that, the girl reads the path of the blow and dodges it using her superhuman reflexes. The young prodigy mentally admits that the boy's attack ended up missing the real target. She then prepares another level 3 ice bullet to continue her magical offensive. but the hero creates a magic shield in front of him, defending against the attack with ease. The boy thinks that with that eye, none of his shots would hit his opponent with force. So he decides to attack at the exact moment her vision has some kind of opening. The elite girl is surprised, noticing that the boy's magic bullet was somewhat strange. She realizes that every shot her opponent launched had something very different about it. Each shot had a slightly different speed and power, confusing her perception. The upperclassman admits she was wrong, as she thought he was only switching between level 1 and 2. The young man was actually adjusting the parameters freely to adapt to each situation. However, the girl smirks, noticing that there was a consistent pattern in his attacks. The slower bullets carried more power, and the faster ones were much weaker. She thinks the strong shots are slow enough to dodge, so she can ignore them. The boy charges a giant shot and launches it at his enemy in piercing mode. The student decides to ignore the slow attack to close the distance between them. And with that, the young woman prepares to advance as soon as the large projectile passes her. The hero explains that her eye reads trajectories by detecting the intent of the attacks, which means she can't predict a blow that carries no intention. Thus, the magic bullet without intention curves and flies back toward the girl. The upperclassman clicks her tongue as she's hit squarely by the blow she had ignored. Then she cries out in surprise at the force of the explosion that hits her with no time to defend. The hero explains that he waited for the exact moment. She let her guard down against the shot. The boy reveals that the weakness of her eye is not being able to predict irregular, intentionless attacks. With a confident smile, the young man states that he finally managed to catch his rival in an opening. He knows that even seeing the attack means nothing if she can't dodge it. The upperclassman then tries to counterattack, using her ice magic to turn the situation around. But the newbie finds it slow and fires his piercing shot with full force to end the fight. Suddenly, the protagonist is startled to see his own magic fail during the shot. In his thoughts, the boy wonders if the spell missed the target for some reason. The opponent realizes that wasn't her ability and fears that someone interfered. Without warning, an ice crystal appears and hits the young man in the chest, knocking him down hard. Lying in the arena, the hero hears the referee declare the end of the fight, with the upperclassman as the winner. The blonde then raises his arm, officially confirming the newbie's defeat in that duel. Getting up from the ground, the boy clenches his fists, grumbling with great anger about his loss. The audience mocks the boy, thinking he lost because he ran out of mana or was just unlucky. But the protagonist assures himself that he still had plenty of energy to continue. He realizes that right at the moment of the shot, someone messed with his ability and sabotaged him. The reincarnated boy's friend runs toward him, yelling and asking if he was okay. The young man assures her he was fine and gets up with the help of his worried partner by his side. At the arena exit, the redhead and his group decide to leave after the end of the battle. But the lackeys mock their boss behind his back, saying the newbie learned his place. The red-haired leader turns around furiously, asking if they really believe that nonsense. The group of henchmen is left confused and speechless by their boss's outburst of anger. Suddenly, the upperclassman glares at one of his lackeys and calls his name in a serious tone. The elite student appears in front of the villain, questioning if he was behind the sabotage. But the redhead denies it and questions why he would ruin the chance to see his rival's real strength. The blue-haired girl closes her eyes and says it doesn't matter anymore, dropping the situation. She then turns and leaves, promising she would remember the boy's name forever. The villain scratches his head, annoyed that someone interrupted the fight at a crucial moment. He narrows his eyes, remembering the last attack his rival launched in the combat. The reincarnated young man smirks, imagining how the fight would have ended if his blow had hit. With a wicked smile, the redhead thinks the newbie would be much more interesting than expected. Sometime later in the library, the hero's friend celebrates happily for having solved an exercise. We then see that the duo was studying with another classmate at one of the library tables. The boy explains that magical abilities follow basic principles described in books, but what they were doing was knowledge that couldn't be found in a common textbook. The purple-haired girl is shocked to learn that her friend had studied the material so deeply. The young man says it was just a hobby and that he didn't need to go that far to get good grades. The partner thanks him for teaching her how to study, as the test had things she hadn't seen. With a cute smile, she is happy that she can now avoid a failing grade. The reincarnated boy warns that failing meant expulsion, so they would study until she felt confident. Suddenly, the extra at the table smiles strangely and fakes a small slip-up. He reaches his hand toward a cup of water to knock it over on the study materials on purpose. But the hero stops him right away, leaving the pair of students completely surprised. With a serious look, the protagonist alerts his classmate about a small detail of the place. He reminds the extra that drinks without a lid were forbidden inside the library. The bully stammers and apologizes for his mistake, sheepishly putting the cup back. Thus, the protagonist explains that the boy was waiting for the right moment to knock over the cup. The hero's partner screams in shock at the revelation that their classmate was a spy. The young man finds the redhead's plan very clumsy and wonders if this is their only method. Walking at sunset, the boy thinks he's overthinking it and decides to let it go. The purple-haired girl thanks her friend for all the time he dedicated to helping her. He gives a slight smile and says he doesn't mind, as the review was also good for him. With a blushing face, she compliments him, saying he is strong and also very good at his studies. The boy replies that even though he's strong, he can't move up a class without good grades, so he studied. In his thoughts, the reincarnated boy admits that he actually studied for the equivalent of a lifetime. The partner then questions him, wanting to know if his big goal was to reach Class A. With a serious look, the young man confirms that graduating from the elite class is a prerequisite. Hearing this, the student becomes very curious and asks what his main goal was. The protagonist then reveals that his dream is to enter the famous Tenji University. The girl is shocked by the name, as he would need a massive academic level. With a clenched fist, he reveals that he wants to make the adjustment technique something everyone can use. She thinks that the trend of valuing the rarity of skills would never change in the future. But the boy believes that if everyone used the adjustment, the world's common sense would change. He dreams of a world where even the untalented can reach the top through their own effort. The young man admits that his adjustment theory is seen as a great heresy by common sense. He remembers that if he defends the theory without support, it will be dismissed as simple occultism. That's why the boy needs academic credentials and an authority the world can't ignore. Clenching his fist, he promises to put an end to this age of ignorance that haunted him so much. He wants a world where untalented mages like him don't have to give up on their future. His partner stares at him in silence, completely amazed by her friend's grand dream. With her hands clasped, the purple-haired girl praises her companion, finding him incredible. She confesses she doesn't have such a big goal and just wanted to graduate safely. Walking beside her friend, the girl starts to think about how she wanted to feel. The young woman wishes to become someone who can proudly say she did everything she could. With a blushing face, she admits that her goal is small compared to his. The protagonist then shows a slight and gentle smile upon hearing his friend's words. He denies what she said and states that her goal was also very good and noble. Elsewhere, the red-haired leader is sitting in a chair with his lackeys lined up. Showing an arrogant smile, the villain calmly awaits the report from his henchman. The henchman who tried to spill the water reports that he interfered with the target's studies, but the boss glares at him with a deathly look and asks if he failed his mission. The lackey starts to stammer in pure fear, not knowing what to say to his boss. With a frightening calmness, the redhead stands up and tells his subordinate not to be afraid. He then questions if he has ever beaten someone who followed orders but still failed. The extra stammers, answering no, and the boss agrees as if it were obvious. Then the villain grabs his lackey's head, squeezing it with crushing force. The redhead warns that this is the punishment for trying to hide his pathetic failure in the mission. The boss explains to another henchman that the silly interference was just a setup. Looking out the window, the villain reveals that our hero was the main course of the hunt. With a wicked smile, he reveals that his targets were now his great rival's friends. The big day of the exam arrives, and the hero's partner looks very tense at her desk. In the room, some malicious eyes stare at the girl, creating an atmosphere of pure intimidation. The girl starts to break out in a cold sweat, wondering in her thoughts how things got to this point. With tears in her eyes, she fears that at this rate, she would end up being expelled from the academy forever. In a quiet coffee shop, our hero is sitting and chatting with his great friend. The purple-haired girl looks at him and asks if he is really going to participate in the promotion battle. Taking a sip of his drink, the young man confirms it without showing a single ounce of fear. With a confident smile, he explains that students with high grades in Class B can move up a class. To get promoted, he needs to beat the 10th place student and take their spot in the elite class. The young man reveals that he got first place in the dungeon exercise and also in the academic exam. With a clenched fist, he states that with this, he has finally earned the right to be promoted. His friend gets all excited about the news and promises to cheer for him with all her might. The young man smiles back and thanks her for the great support she has always given him at the academy. Then his partner asks when he plans to go, and the young man says he is leaving right at that moment. She smiles in a cute way, thinking he has finally made a firm decision in his life. But it hits her, and the girl panics when she realizes he was being totally serious. Right after that, our hero is already walking through the academy courtyard, heading to the duel. Checking the time on his cell phone, he notices it is already time for his big showdown. He remembers that they tried to get his friend kicked out during the exam to try to shake him up. So the young man decides to push forward as fast as possible so that no one can interfere. He finds the information about the current 10th place student he needs to face to move up. His opponent is a young man named Taizai Kuramata, who seems very confident about the duel. He wears steel armor, acting as a tank who fights with high defense and a lot of slowness. The protagonist compares him to an old enemy, but many levels higher on the power scale. He thinks that anything below a maximum power shot would not even leave a scratch on him. With a smile on his face, he knew the opponent would be trouble the moment he heard Class A. But the young man clenches his fists and moves forward, determined not to stay stuck there, no matter what. With that, our hero finally arrives at the door of the duel room in the Magic Academy. Placing his hand on the door, the young man gets ready to meet his great rival there. However, to his surprise, his opponent is not the same one he had researched earlier. The young man finds it strange because he remembered that only those involved in the battle could enter the place. The new enemy confirms the rule, saying that only the 2 fighters could be inside. With a smirk, the mysterious young man reveals that this is exactly why he is there. With a dark look, our hero finally understands what is really going on. He admits to himself that his enemies acted much faster than expected. The young man recognizes the opponent as the strongest force in the cluster, aside from the leader himself. He is the 7th strongest student in the entire academy, the fearsome Akira Ashima. The villain reveals that 10 minutes ago, he became the 10th strongest student in the class. The hero realizes that he challenged the 10th place student and lost on purpose to be demoted. He understands that if the 10th place student changes before the duel, the new student becomes the opponent. The enemy says that facing the magic bullet destroyer shows just how serious their leader is. The rival says he will not call the young man unlucky for having his promotion suddenly blocked. He then questions why the young man refused the invitation to join their group. The villain turns around and asks what our protagonist really thinks of the cluster group. The enemy admits he does not think it is fair, but it is an attractive enough organization to follow. With a serious look, the hero glares at his rival with disdain for that suggestion of an easy life. The young man then states with a smile that their values are very different in the end. He reveals that the answer is simple because his dream cannot be achieved by following the group. The young man says that for someone like him, just having the magic bullet and decent grades is not enough. He thinks the cluster is perfect for the goal of all its members getting reasonable grades. But our hero needs overwhelmingly exceptional grades to overcome his limitation. He states there was no merit in joining them, and that is why he did not join the group. Hearing the young man's explanation, the villain seems to understand the logic behind that decision, but right after that, the enemy puts his hand on his head and does not understand taking such a risk for a dream. The hero replies that he is not asking for his understanding and just wanted to make the reason clear. Suddenly, the arena activates, and a voice announces the start of the promotion battle between the pair. The rival confesses that he hates taking risks and just wants to live safely with average results. He warns that whatever happens in the fight is the hero's fault and asks the boy not to hold a grudge. But the protagonist states that he will not be angry because he is sure he will be the winner. With that said, the duel begins and our hero already gets into his combat stance to attack. He fires a burst of magic bullets, so as not to give the enemy time to put up his defense. However, the opponent stands still while a green energy barrier defends against the strike. With a smirk, the rival asks if he thought his defense would be weak at the start. He brags that no magic bullet can reach him, and that is why he is the magic bullet destroyer. The protagonist looks at him and points, saying that now that he has seen reality, he will reinforce something. The enemy makes a face and repeats that no matter the outcome, he does not want to hold a grudge. The two opponents stand face to face in the arena with the hologram audience watching them. In the stands, the hero's partner whispers his name with a lot of worry on her face. The students are shocked when they see two important people arriving to watch the fight. We then see the elite senior and the student council president entering the battleground. The blonde guy questions the girl because it is the first time she is watching someone else's fight. The senior then answers coldly that there is no particular reason for it, but the blonde guy adjusts his glasses and reveals that he wants to see how a bullet mage faces the destroyer. On the battlefield, our hero prepares for what is to come in the great showdown. The council president watches everything closely, wanting to see how the fight would unfold. The protagonist notices that his opponent's barrier is an automatic defense skill. He knows that a self-defense that creates barriers is useful, but he already has a plan for that. So the young man uses his split style to launch a very wide-range magic attack. But the shots are useless against his rival's level 3 defense, which covers his entire body. Wasting no time, the opponent prepares to finally begin his counterattack. He summons a level 3 weapon, materializing a green energy pistol in his hand. With a wicked smile, the enemy points the weapon at the hero, warning him that it is his turn. The young man creates a shield, knowing that the weapon's shots are stronger than the magic bullets. He then positions his shield at a perfect angle to be able to deflect all the shots. While defending himself, the young man takes the chance to run and close the distance between them. His friend celebrates happily because now he can fire his bullets, focused at full power. With that, the hero launches his piercing shot with maximum force, right at his opponent's face. The powerful blue energy blast hits the enemy's defense with overwhelming force. But the rival activates a level 3 barrier without showing a single ounce of worry. The shot is blocked by a new yellow shield, leaving the hero completely surprised. The protagonist's partner screams in shock, unable to believe that his strongest attack failed. The enemy asks if the boy thought that breaking his self-defense would be the end of everything for him. He admits that the bullets are strong, but he just needs to make sure the young man does not get close. The hero then fires a slow magic bullet, using his ricochet style to attack. The opponent dodges easily, thinking the shot is too slow and that he does not need to block it. Suddenly, a faster second shot collides with the first one, changing its path. With this, the rival is taken completely by surprise by the unexpected attack he did not foresee. The magic bullet then flies toward him at high speed, giving him no time to react. The friend in the audience remembers the elite senior using that exact same combat technique. The projectile hits the enemy's automatic defense, creating a small energy explosion. The protagonist grits his teeth, seeing that not even that surprise attack managed to work. The villain reveals he had already seen the technique in his duel against the elite senior. He explains that his self-defense can block even attacks he cannot react to. With a smirk, the enemy states that any kind of surprise attack is useless. The hero then focuses all his power and fires a burst of rapid shots from both hands. The projectiles merge in the air and form a single giant magic bullet with destructive power. Seeing the attack, the enemy raises his level 3 barrier to defend himself against the explosion. But to his surprise, his powerful yellow shield begins to crack under the force of the strike. Right after that, the barrier shatters into 1,000 pieces, leaving the rival in pure shock. In the audience, his friend celebrates happily because his magic bullet finally pierced the defense. With this, the blast hits the opponent's stomach, throwing him backward with the impact of the magic. The rival then looks down and admits that that surprise attack actually scared him. With a slight smile on his face, the enemy glares at our hero with a very defiant look. He reveals that he actually possesses a magic resistance skill that decreases damage. The young man is surprised, and the rival asks him if he has finally understood the situation of the fight. With a wicked smile, the enemy guarantees that even if the shots hit him, he cannot win. The boy's partner is shocked in the stands, unable to believe that plot twist. The villain admits he did not expect the rookie to be so strong with just a single spell. He thinks that if the boy had one more skill, he probably would not have won. Holding his weapon, he states that if they keep going like this, he has a 99% chance of winning. But the enemy knows he cannot let his guard down and prepares to continue his attack. Then he creates several clones and starts shooting to wear down the hero and defeat him little by little. The rival knows the young man is on another level and wants to secure his victory without hesitation. With that, the protagonist is forced to use his shield to defend himself from the rain of shots. His friend gets worried because even her partner is being pressured by the bullet destroyer. With clasped hands, the girl cheers silently for her great friend not to give up. The hero realizes that the enemy's strategy is to stop him from getting close to attack at close range. The villain thinks a proud mage would be shaken by fighting on equal terms with someone inferior. The young man knows he needs to get close, or he will lose from exhaustion if he continues at this slow pace. With a smile, he decides it is time to use the ace up his sleeve that he was keeping a secret. He warns his rival that he will break his defense with his new special combat technique. The protagonist then prepares a different magic bullet with a very strange energy aura. Seeing that, the enemy is confused, not understanding what is happening in front of him. The young man fires, but his magic bullet simply vanishes in the air without leaving a trace. The opponent is completely shocked and wonders if the projectile really just vanished out of nowhere. Suddenly, the invisible bullet hits his face, making him shout in pure pain and surprise. Without understanding a thing, the rival wonders what happened and if the magic bullet really hit him. Our hero then reveals the name of his secret technique, the powerful and fearsome invisible style. He explains that it is literally an invisible magic bullet, and the enemy sees several clones of him. The protagonist then prepares a new invisible shot to continue his magic offensive. With a tense look, the opponent feels that the next attack is already coming his way. He thinks that even without seeing it, he can block it if he knows the path, and activates his self-defense. But the shot hits him again, making him drop his weapon on the ground with the force of the impact. The villain screams in anger and wonders why on earth he could not block the attack. He then realizes that the shot actually did not break his defense, which was still intact. The young man wonders if his rival's magic bullet can simply pass through defenses. Another shot hits him in the leg and knocks him to the ground, leaving him with no chance to react. He notes that the self-defense activated, but even so, he could not block the bullets. Our hero then points at his fallen enemy on the ground with a handgun gesture. He gets closer and says that in the end, the rival failed to destroy his magic bullets. With a smirk, the young man teases him, calling him by his title of Bullet Destroyer. The opponent panics and screams in fear as he realizes he is totally defeated. The young man points his finger at his head and asks if he can create a point point-blank shield. He warns that even with resistance, his bullets are not weak enough to withstand without a defense. With that, our hero fires his piercing shot at full power to end the fight. With this, the enemy cries out in pain and is thrown backward, dropping his energy weapon. The rival then passes out on the arena floor, completely defeated by the boy's final strike. Then the system voice announces that the winner of the promotion battle is our hero. In the audience, the background students' jaws drop, unable to believe the destroyer's defeat. Lying on the ground, the villain thinks that unfortunately, he ended up losing the battle in a humiliating way. The protagonist then looks at his defeated rival and states that he could not lose no matter what. Right after that, the arena deactivates, and the battle finally comes to its long-awaited end. In the stands, the crowd wonders in shock how it was possible for an invisible bullet to exist. But the council leader finds that idea of an invisible magic bullet very interesting to see. Adjusting his glasses, he praises the young man's trick, finding the technique very well crafted. However, the elite senior states that he did not actually fire an invisible magic bullet. She explains that if it were invisible, the self-defense would still have shown traces of blocking. The blonde guy confirms and reveals that the self-defense activates when an attack enters the user's range. From this, he deduces that the bullet did not pierce the defense, but simply slipped right through it. With the duel over, the elite student stands up and announces that she is already leaving the place. The blonde guy then decides that it is also time to go back to his work at the council. He takes one last look at the new elite class student with very genuine interest. The young leader tells his partner that starting tomorrow, the young man will be their new classmate. With a wicked smile, he reveals that he is eager to see how the rookie would fight in Class A. Sometime later in front of the dorm, our hero says goodbye to his friend once again. With a radiant smile, the girl celebrates that from that day on he is in Class A. She then compliments him, saying that the elite class tie ended up looking good on him. The young man gets a bit shy from the compliment and asks if she really thinks so. He then thanks his partner and reveals that he only managed to reach Class A because of her. With a sincere look, he confesses that without her, he would not have moved up the classes so easily. But his friend denies it and says that she is actually the one who should thank him for everything he did. She remembers the past and is glad to have accepted the hand he reached out to her. The girl promises that even in different classes, she will always be cheering for him from afar. The protagonist shows a slight smile on his face and thanks her for all the support she gave. He warns that the group will not bother her anymore, but that she can call him if anything happens. With her face blushing in embarrassment, the young woman thanks him for all the concern he felt. She then smiles confidently and assures him that from that moment on she would be fine. The young man looks at his friend as she promises that she would try her best with her own strength. The girl reveals that her goal now is to graduate from that academy with great pride. Hearing that, our hero breaks into a slight smirk, understanding his great friend. He reaches out his hand to his partner as a sign that they could count on each other. The young man then asks that even in different classes, they both give it their absolute best. His partner looks at him with a determined gaze and a gentle smile on her face for her friend. With that, the two seal the promise with a handshake and say goodbye in front of the dorm. The next day, several students walk down the academy hallway on another school day. We then see our hero walking down the elite class hallway wearing his new tie. He thinks that in his first life at the academy, he never managed to reach that hallway before. Suddenly, a familiar voice calls the young man's name from inside his new classroom. It is the red-haired villain who, with a smirk, decides to give his warm welcome. With an intimidating look, he reveals that this is the special honors class of the academy. The redhead says it is a great time for him to move up a class, and the hero questions him about it. With a serious tone, the young man glares at his rival while he warns him about a special exam. The villain then reveals that it is the representative selection exam for the Tokinata Academy. With this, the protagonist thinks that a direct clash between them is finally going to happen. With a maniacal smile, The redhead warns that he is going to crush the protagonist with his bare hands. Then the scene cuts to a classroom where a bald teacher is standing in front of the students. The teacher then announces that the exam time is up and asks everyone to put their pens down. Our hero thinks that, at the end of the day, all of that was somewhat disappointing. He expected an aggressive interference and wonders if the rival wants to crush him with brute force. The teacher then collects the exams and announces that with this, the tests are finally over. Suddenly, a female student stands up and gets the teacher's attention with her hand raised. The instructor then turns around and asks what happened for her to call him. The girl then asks the teacher to check our hero's friend's desk. With a serious look, she reveals that she saw the protagonist's partner cheating during the test. The purple-haired girl is completely shocked, not understanding a thing about that accusation. Our hero then grits his teeth as he finally understands what is going on there. He realizes that the cluster group was actually targeting his friend from the very beginning. With that, another female student also stands up and shouts that she ended up seeing the exact same thing. Right after that, a third student confirms the same story to the teacher. A fourth student also speaks up and accuses the purple-haired girl of cheating. With this, our hero's partner is terrified, not knowing how to react to all of that. He knows that for the cluster, it would be easy to plant fake evidence and manipulate the class's mood. The student then points at his friend and accuses her of hiding something under her desk. The young woman desperately denies the accusation, but no one seems to believe her. Suddenly, a piece of paper with a cheat sheet ends up falling on the floor near her feet. The paper on the floor is actually a cheat sheet for the test they just took. With a shocked face, the girl shouts, saying she never had anything like that. The teacher approaches and asks if it is true, and the girl stutters, trying to explain herself. She panics because she knows that if the teacher finds the cheat sheet, she will be accused. The instructor then announces that just to be sure, he is going to take a look inside the student's desk. The girl despairs and wonders how on earth all of that had happened to her. With tears in her eyes, the young woman thinks that at this rate she will certainly be expelled. Our hero realizes the situation is terrible, and he needs to get rid of that fake evidence. He plans to create a small, fast, and silent magic bullet, so no one will notice. With that, the young man fires his rapid-fire magic bullet very discreetly. The small blue energy blast hits the cheat sheet dead on, disintegrating it. With a smirk, he thinks that with this the fake evidence has finally disappeared. His partner then looks at him with a grateful gaze, whispering his name. Our hero returns the look with a very confident smile to reassure his friend. The teacher then bends down to look, but ends up finding nothing on the floor. The girl who accused her is shocked and shouts that this is simply impossible. The teacher then scolds her, saying she cannot accuse a classmate without any proof. But he admits it is true that several people found her behavior suspicious. He says that cheating will show up in the answers, and that they will investigate after seeing the grades. Then the teacher asks the purple-haired girl to meet him in the guidance counselor's office. With a worried face, the young woman agrees and accepts her teacher's request. Then the scene cuts to lunchtime, with the students chatting in the classroom. Someone comments that Class D is full of fools, and the purple-haired girl hears everything. Two students comment that she will be expelled for cheating, and that she threw her chance away. They suggest she just give up already, since lower-tier students have no pride. Our hero finds that awful, because now even students outside the cluster suspect her. He knows that if they frame her, their plan works, but if not, the pressure will make her leave. The young man grits his teeth and thinks he was not going to complain, but that was just too much. With a look of pure anger, our hero thinks that the whole situation is disgusting. With that, our hero stands up abruptly and glares at the group from afar. His partner is surprised by the reaction and whispers his name very softly. On the other side of the room, the group of bullies gathers to mock the innocent girl. The young man then goes to the cluster's room and kicks the door open to confront their leader. With a look of pure anger, our hero enters the room and glares at his great enemy. With a smirk, The redhead says he already figured he would show up there. He then provokes the young man, saying he heard things got ugly in his classroom. Our hero accuses him of framing his friend and calls him a coward for that plan. But the villain states with a smirk that this is a baseless accusation. He questions him for calling a student who stood up for justice a liar and a cheater. The protagonist replies that it takes a lot of courage to expose a huge cheating scheme. He says that coming from the king of a cheating ring, that sounded very different. The redhead is a bit surprised by the answer and glares at his rival with a serious look. The villain asks him if he has any proof that the cheating accusation was fake. With a smile on his face, he guarantees that our hero has no real proof. He then asks the young man to give up on everything and say goodbye to his great friend. The redhead says that only having a high school degree is the same as having no future in their society. He accuses him of knowing nothing about the pain of being expelled or the fear of having nothing. The villain then remembers a lonely hand reached out in a dark and gloomy alley. With a furious look, our hero glares at him and shouts at him not to mess with him. With that, the young man steps forward and grabs his rival's collar, lifting him forcefully. The redhead stares at him and asks if he really wants to settle this using force. But the protagonist states he will not fight, so as not to get expelled, and throws him to the ground. He then points at his enemy and warns that he will regret challenging him. Back in the classroom, the bald teacher announces that roll call is finally over. With a serious look, the teacher turns to the purple-haired girl and calls her by her name. He tells her that they are going to do an inquiry and asks her to go to the disciplinary room later. With a sad expression on her face, the young woman agrees and accepts the teacher's request. She thinks it is the end for her and that all of this is happening because she does not know her place in the class. Suddenly, our hero stands up and asks the instructor to wait a moment. The teacher then turns around and asks what he wants with him this time again. With that, the protagonist approaches the desk and says he has a proposal to make. He says it is about the cheating allegations involving his great partner. The young man states that they did not find any real proof of that accusation. The teacher agrees but says there is also no proof to the contrary, and that is why they have the investigation. The young man then declares that he personally suspects his friend cheated. The purple-haired girl is shocked and stares at him, unable to believe what she just heard. He suggests that the lack of proof is because she might have destroyed everything with a skill. With this, the protagonist proposes that they do a skill search to investigate. His partner is shocked and asks why he is doing that to her. She realizes that if they investigate him, they will find proof that he used a skill. The young woman then wonders if he is trying to cast suspicion upon himself. She clenches her fists and thinks she cannot cause any more trouble for her great friend. Suddenly, a female student stands up and says she was thinking about something regarding the case. She suggests that all that cheating mess might just be a big misunderstanding. The protagonist's friend looks at her with a surprised gaze, not understanding her attitude. Two other girls also stand up and defend her, saying they saw nothing suspicious. The first accuser gets annoyed and asks what on earth they are talking about. One student asks her if she looked at the whole test and reminds her that they did not find the proof. With that, the mood in the room changes, and everyone starts defending the girl from the accusation. The girl who accused her is shocked, not understanding the reason for that turnaround in the room. A friend of hers then whispers that the situation got really bad and that they need to do something. Seeing the class's reaction, the two girls in the group panic, not knowing what to do. With that, the first accuser finally has a sudden realization and seems to understand the situation. She then stands up abruptly and ends up catching the bald teacher's attention. With a bowing gesture, the girl apologizes to our protagonist's partner. She confesses that after the test, she checked her classmate's desk without asking permission. The purple-haired girl is shocked by the confession and does not understand what is going on. The student says she found a cheat sheet, but that it was something completely unrelated to the test. Hearing that, the instructor is surprised and looks at the girl with a very serious gaze. She explains that the situation escalated quickly and that she was afraid to say anything. With that, the student bows in apology in front of the entire class of students. Then the scene cuts to the two of them leaving the classroom after all the mess. Our hero smiles and says that at the end of the day, it seems like everything worked out for them. His friend looks at him and asks what on earth was really going on back there. She remembers that there really was a cheat sheet in her desk earlier. Then the girl sees the cluster members, who knew it was not a misunderstanding. She then questions why they started defending her in the classroom. The young man turns to his partner and replies that the answer is quite simple. With a smile, he reveals that they would be in trouble if a skill search was used. He explains that the cluster uses telepathy to share answers among the members. A skill search to investigate the cheating would end up exposing all of them. That is why they had no choice but to defend her and erase the accusation. The young man says that when he noticed the trap, he knew it would be impossible to prove her innocence. So he gave up on finding proof and focused on ending the incident without any evidence. His partner starts to sniffle, and the young man turns around, worried about his friend. The protagonist then looks at her and asks, what is wrong for her to be like that? With tears in her eyes, the girl thanks him for everything and says she is very relieved. She confesses she actually thought she would be expelled from the academy because of that. The young woman looks at him and reveals that if it was not for him, all would be lost for her. With her face blushing in embarrassment, the girl continues to cry, moved by his help. The young man says he only did what he had to and asks her not to worry about it. With a gentle smile on his face, he states he is just happy she is safe. His partner looks at him with a grateful gaze while tears run down her face. The scene cuts to the cluster HQ with the red-haired leader sitting in his boss chair. One of his henchmen hands over a paper and says he got his test results. The villain takes the sheet and questions if he really got perfect grades in everything. He admits that even with a different test, the rookie seemed to be pretty smart in the end. The redhead thinks that he got first place and earned the right to be promoted to Class A. He realizes that sending the trash and setting traps did not work to stop the young man. With a wicked smile, he throws the papers and says they are going to crush him with absolute power. The villain then looks at one of his allies and says that this is where he comes into the story. We then see the magic bullet destroyer, Akira Ashima, the 7th place student in Class A,